into another edition of the Hilltopper Sports Podcast. I am Todd Ullom, along with me, Shawn, Rine. Shawn, this show is going to be a fun one. This is 2 shows in a row for you. We had Malik McKinney on the last episode. We're going to have Lynn Ullom, the athletic director of West Liberty, on this one. It's a big get for us. He's the big dog when it comes to athletics on the Hilltop, and he's been busy as of late because everything was canceled, just having to figure out how to get everything done now because everything has been thrown off kilter.
Very, very busy, man. Anytime if anybody's ever been around an athletic director and know what they do, they're busy all the time. But when you throw a huge wrench into the situation like now, I can't imagine. I figure he doesn't have too much downtime right about now.
Yeah, I do not envy him at this point. Would not want to be in his shoes. It's got to be a tough time when, they keep talking about the possibility of things in the future for sports not necessarily starting up right away, and just the thought of fall sports being in trouble as well. Not being able to play at the very start of their season, at least, if not being completely canceled. That's a scary part. Everything else is scary, but for us, we try to keep the show entertaining and give this a reason for people to get their mind off of some of the bad things. And if sports are going to be gone for that long, it makes it that much worse.
I think we're starting to see some positive movement. And I think, if everything goes correctly, we'll see more positive movement. I don't think this is going to be a situation where everything is just back to normal, or that we will even have the same normal. It's just hard to tell. And as far as Lynn goes, and you talk about not envying him, the really difficult part, if you would try to put yourself in his shoes, is there is no handbook for this. It's unprecedented. He's kind of having to fly by the seat of his pants. And, I'm not privy to everything, but it seems like he has that ship moving and sailing smoothly, which an incredible hat tip to him, because this can't be easy. Again, because you just don't know what to do. I would have no idea what to do, and you can't look back and say, oh well, this is what this person did, so maybe we'll try and implement this, because there is no that person. This is the first time, and hopefully it'll be an only time, but for him to give us the type of time and access that he did was, I just think, awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun talking to Coach Ullom on this, and you'll hear it in the intro that we give him as well when we pitch to the interview. He's the athletic director now, but we still call him Coach. Can't help it. He'll always be Coach. The winningest coach in women's basketball in West Virginia history. I think that's fairly impressive. Not a big deal at all. Not a big deal.
People, and we touched on this a little bit in the interview, people forget because of how successful the men's program has become, that at one time this was a women's basketball school. Lynn and that group carried the flag, so to speak, for West Liberty athletic-wise for a long time. Kind of, in a way, they were the West Liberty men before the West Liberty men were. It was like a traveling circus, kind of. When West Lib's women came to town, you saw the crowds pick up in opposing arenas, because you knew you were going to get a show that night, because they were just so well groomed, and they were ahead of their time. They played a brand of basketball that people weren't used to seeing on the women's game. I remember there was a time, I'm going to date myself here, but whenever I first started covering and going to West Liberty games, there was a time where, as a newspaper reporter, my assignment was go cover the women and then come back to the office. We didn't cover the men because nobody cared about it. That was just the fact of the matter. And in a time where it was very difficult for women's basketball or women's sports in general to get that type of notoriety, I think speaks volumes to the way that we as a newspaper treated that program.
And you see what he's done as an athletic director, all the accomplishments and all the great things he did as a coach in women's basketball, moves to athletic director. He brings in acro and tumbling, brings back the men's soccer program. He's done a lot of good things here at West Liberty as the athletic director as well. So he just keeps on doing it, keeps on moving things along and making things better for athletics on the Hilltop. We talked a little bit right before this just about how things can get back to normal somewhat. And, sporting wise, live sporting events, we at least had one recently, and we're finally getting to cover it now. A little bit late, I guess you could say, is when we're going to release this. But the NFL draft happened, and it was a little bit uplifting. I think I didn't watch so much the first night because the Steelers did not have a pick. So I'm a little biased there. I didn't really care that much, kind of knew who was going to go first and Joe Burrow. But the second day and all the rounds after that, that one was the fun part to watch because you get to see your team pick and all those things. But it was way more interesting. I'm not going to say interesting, but I watched a lot more intently this year because there were no other sports on. It's been so long since there's been something live that you haven't seen before, don't know the outcome. It was just fun to finally get away and have a little bit of release from everything that's been going on and try to look forward to something positive with the teams.
It's interesting because I too watched way more of that than I normally would. I would always, in general, try and time it. After the Steelers would pick, I would say, okay, I roughly have this much time. I found myself not getting up from in front of the TV just because I was getting to see some highlights. I was getting to see sports in general. And for me, the Steelers are just huge in my house. So the NFL draft, I've got a group of friends that we basically, for about 2 or 3 weeks leading up to it, text heavily about the draft. Who do you think is going to be available here, blah, blah, blah. And, not to overstate it or make it too silly, but it's almost like you're waiting to see who's going to become the next member of your family. You're getting another cousin or nephew or somebody like that. And it gets my blood boiling because I know that means, well, maybe not now, but generally speaking, the off-season program's getting ready to ramp up. Then you're going to go to OTAs, and then you're going to go to training camp. We don't know what that's going to be like this year, but I don't think it takes away from the excitement any. I like what the Steelers did. I don't think it was a quote-unquote sexy draft for them, but I don't think it needed to be really. You didn't need – we were in a situation this year that we haven't been in a while where basically we needed to acquire some depth. The starting lineup is pretty much set except for maybe one spot on the offensive line, maybe another receiver. You'll see a new starting receiver this year. But outside of that, it was depth guys that we needed. And that depth was tested in a big way last year with, when you got down to the stretch run, the fact that they were even still in the playoff race is amazing because some of those guys, we had never heard of previously, and we'll probably never hear of them again. That's just what it was. They were basically picking guys up off the street just to be able to go play a game on a Sunday.
Well, luckily, some of the guys they got in this draft could help out with that. We'll see if they will. Like you said, in the second round, the Steelers did not have a first-round pick, but in the second round, they picked a receiver out of Notre Dame, Chase Claypool. He's 6'4". And the things that I heard about him immediately just from people, not experts, just people that I know that maybe watch some Notre Dame games, he's not the fastest guy, but you look at his 40 time, which doesn't always mean everything. It's faster than Juju's was and a lot of other receivers that we had. So a red zone target for Ben. Loves the big receivers. and they're going to give him one. Hopefully he turns out for the next, 2 or 3 years left in Ben's career, he'll have that big receiver that he loves.
I mean, you think about it now. You've got Claypool at 6'4". You've got Eric Ebron at 6'4", who they signed as a free agent tight end. You've got Vance McDonald at 6'4". And the biggest thing, no pun intended, with Claypool is he's going to play outside, which is going to allow Juju to go back inside into the slot, which is his more natural position. I think he's a lot better in that area and going across the middle. And hopefully this will take some of the pressure off of him. I'll be honest, Antonio Brown had to go. I mean, I don't think there's any question about that, as hard as that is to say. It was time he had to go. And I said that knowing, or at least believing in my heart, that Juju wasn't a number one. He's just not a number one guy. He doesn't have that makeup. He doesn't have that separation. He doesn't create it. And he got a lot of open real estate because Antonio Brown was being doubled and tripled. And then that wasn't there last year. And Juju battled injuries, obviously.
And no Ben.
Yeah, and no Ben. And
that might be the biggest one.
Well, that's absolutely the biggest one. But the thing that really kind of perplexes me about a certain segment of Steelers fans is the fact that a lot of them are upset that we didn't take a quarterback. We don't need a quarterback. Okay?
There were none left that were any good.
No, and we don't need one right now because you're in win now mode. Because here's what's going to happen. Ben, Mike Tomlin, and the GM, Kevin Colbert, their contracts are all lined up the same. They all expire at the same time. When that happens, everybody's going out the door, and it's going to be a complete rebuild. You need to draft players that can help now. You don't worry about grooming a quarterback for 3 years down the road because 3 years down the road, it's over anyway. It's a complete reboot from top to bottom. So you go and you find guys that can help now. You go all in for the next 3 years, knowing damn well that there's going to be some lean years following that. I would rather know and accept that those lean years are coming after Ben leaves than them not going all in and trying when he's here. Right. See, because the Packers, the Eagles, they took guys early, first and second round, quarterbacks that you don't need. They cannot help you in 2020. And I think that's the difference between the Steelers and more so the Packers because the Packers were in the NFC Championship game last year. And I'm not a huge Aaron Rodgers fan. I think he's overrated. However, he got into the NFC Championship game. Get him some targets, some weapons that can help you get over that hump. Why are you worrying about 3 years down the road or 4 years down the road when you were one game from playing in the Super Bowl?
Well, you should have been around for Jerry Krause and the Bulls.
Yeah, I know. I watch it and I get incredibly angry about it again. It's like it's happening live in real time again. Well, I worship that team. But you didn't see the background of it. And now that I'm seeing the background of how that dynasty was taken apart from the inside, it's like I'm twice as mad now.
Luckily for the Steelers, that is not what they did in this draft. After they took the receiver, they took an outside linebacker from Charlotte, Alex Highsmith, his highlights. And again, everybody gets drafted. You're seeing the best of the best highlights that they could possibly provide. So you don't see the bad stuff. You never will on the draft shows. But looked like a pretty good edge rusher. Then they took a running back out of Maryland, Anthony McFarland Jr., speed back. We'll see what happens when they had a chance at Dobbins right before they took Claypool. We'll see what happens. Then Kevin Dotson in the fourth round, a guard from Louisiana Lafayette. Big guy. He's a mauler. He moves people.
Everybody's saying that he might be their best draft pick. and he's got a chance to start right now.
Yeah, with the retirement of Ramon Foster, there's a spot open for him. We'll see. You keep hearing things how they may move Filer down to guard from tackle to guard and put Banner in, which I don't see a problem with. That wouldn't upset me at all. The 6th round, the Steelers took a safety from Maryland, another one. What was it? Shawn Davis was the last safety they took from Maryland. It wasn't.
Yeah, I saw that pick, and I said, you didn't learn your lesson last time.
Yeah. And in the 7th round, they took a defensive tackle, Carlos Davis, out of Nebraska. Davis, he's about, 6'1" or 2, maybe 3. He's not the tallest of guys, but again, if they designated him to fill that need at nose guard, maybe. We'll see if he can do that. He is a shorter guy, which is what they kind of – you think of the Hargraves, the Casey Hamptons.
Yeah.
The big guys, but not tall because they need to be that bowling ball to take on 2-3 blockers.
I think the most interesting pick, at least personally to me, is the Highsmith pick. Just because of what it could be in terms of not only now but in the future. They needed depth at outside linebacker, somebody that can come in and spell both T.J. Watt, who before he came in here, the Steelers just exercised his rookie option, and Bud Dupree. But the interesting thing is, if he comes in and he shows that he's going to be capable, what that's going to do is Bud Dupree is this year going to be playing on the franchise tag, which is upward of, I think, $16 million. You've just shaved $15 million off your roster. Mm-hmm. So you want to talk about going all in. You've got an even bigger chance to do that when you replace Dupree with Highsmith. And the great thing is, and people don't think about this a lot because it's not, again, I use this word, it's not the sexy part of football, but special teams. Highsmith is going to play special teams.
Oh, yeah.
Claypool is a special teams demon. The Steelers lost a couple of pretty good special teams guys when you look at Rosie Nix and you look at Tyler Matakevich, who is the leading special teams tackler in the NFL over the course of the last 4 years. So they needed to fill those positions when you talk about field position and things like that. And the fact that Claypool is just a monster on special teams, you don't think of like those top-tier receivers being like that. But he made a name for himself there, too. I mean, the needs, I guess, and I wouldn't say needs, but the holes that needed filled got filled.
Yeah.
And the people will say, oh, well, you still didn't get a quarterback. Okay, well, let me tell you something. I'm not as down on Mason Rudolph as a lot of other people are. And here's why. You cannot judge him on what you saw last year. That offense, in quotes, that was around him, Ben would have struggled with that offense. He being Mason, has intangibles. He's got the big arm. He can make every throw. He's not afraid to stay in the pocket. But what he didn't have were any receivers that could create separation. So he's holding the ball.
He had one receiver that couldn't. He was a rookie, Deontay Johnson.
Right.
And it wasn't all the time.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm still not going to say that Mason Rudolph isn't the answer long term. I think you have to give him the benefit of the doubt playing with the group that he played with. I mean, that was a very, very bad offense.
It absolutely was. Watching it firsthand, it was tough last year. I'm glad that Ben's on track to come back healthy. We can get this offense going back to normal. One last thing you said about the draft and for the Steelers, talking about special teams, the safety they took in the 6th round from Maryland, Brooks, the one thing that they talked about a lot that they seem to harp on with him, he's a tackler. And who knows how well he can cover. He seemed like a Mike Hilton type, but at a safety position instead of corner. So I'm excited to see what he can do.
We need help at safety. Not starting-wise, obviously, but, well, maybe. I think Terrell Edmonds has to take a big step forward here this year. This defense was very good last year. If he takes another step forward, and I mean, there's no reason to think he won't, other than being a pessimist, and that's me. But if he takes another step forward, I mean, this defense is going to be incredibly solid. Incredibly.
Well, I think we've upset enough people in the Valley that are not Steeler fans. They're probably thinking, please, would you just stop talking about this? So we will. We'll pitch it to former women's basketball coach at West Liberty, a legend on the Hilltop, current athletic director, Lynn Ullom. And everybody in Topper Nation, we've got West Liberty's athletic director, Coach Lynn Ullom. He was the coach of women's basketball for many, many years. So many accolades. He's the winningest coach in West Virginia women's basketball history. He's a West Liberty Hall of Famer, and again, a current athletic director at West Liberty University. Coach, thank you so much for being on the show with us.
Well, thanks for having me. Obviously, it's a situation that we wish none of us were in at this point, but as I had mentioned on another podcast last week, this is what we're supposed to do in athletics best, and have to come up with a new plan and figure it out.
Yeah, it's a crazy time right now with everything being canceled. It's not just college sports, it's high school, college, pro, everything has been canceled. Such an odd time. You got word West Liberty was supposed to host or co-host the Atlantic region for men's basketball this year. That's when everything got canceled. So all the hard work that was put in by the athletics department to get everything set up and ready to go had to be canceled at the last minute. What was the feeling inside the athletics department?
Well, obviously, our men's basketball team had finished a conference tournament on such a high note, played so well in that game against Charleston with a huge following of West Liberty people behind them. And I think many of us believed that this team was poised to make a run. They had really started to peak. I think they had won 21 of 22 maybe down the stretch. And we were fortunate enough that we got to co-host a region, the first time that we had hosted in a number of years. So we were excited. Our staff in athletics, Don Clegg, Rick Lancaster, et cetera, had really rolled out the red carpet and welcomed the teams to our site. So it was just weird. We actually had to pull a team off of the floor during their practice to say that it just wasn't going to happen. So really, really a lot of disappointment from all parties. I think from the fans to the players to the administrators to everybody involved, we were really looking forward to that. And unfortunately, due to safety reasons, the NCAA pulled the plug.
Lynn, you've been on the other side of it, of course, as a coach. But from the athletic department side, how difficult and stressful was it for you to have to go to these coaches and say, hey, I'm sorry, but it's over?
It was really, really tough. Fortunately, I think as it picked up steam from Wednesday, and I can't remember which conference came out and said they weren't going to allow fans. And then the NCAA said, okay, we're going to continue, but we're not going to have any fans. And then they said, well, we're going to let every player have 2 or 3. But there were signs there that it could potentially be pulled out from under us. So I think that did help a little bit when it was finally, when the decision was finally made to cancel. I don't think it took a lot of people by surprise. But as a former coach, it's those situations that you talk about all year. You want to play well late and get into the tournament and make a run, whether it's a conference tournament or a regional. So I couldn't have think of a worse time that would happen to the student athletes and the coaching staff.
And with that, everything else that's going on, the other sports, we talked about basketball being canceled. It was the postseason there. Same with wrestling. They were in their postseason. So they got their full season in. These other sports, the spring sports, whether it's baseball, softball, those kinds of sports, they pretty much had their entire season canceled. And I'm not positive on this. I think there might be a chance that some of those seniors, if they wanted to come back, could for that final season.
Right. And I think the higher profile sports, the football and the basketball, world kind of dominates the headlines, but we have a lot of other dedicated student athletes and coaches that you're right didn't get a chance to perform hardly at all. I think softball and baseball had a few games in, but equally as heartbreaking to them, because at least in basketball, 80% of the teams had already finished their season. And in wrestling, they had already went through the regional qualifying round. So we only had wrestlers at the nationals, but those other sports, they basically lost an entire season. And although that the NCAA did step in immediately, it wasn't long after that they granted the extra year of eligibility to the seniors. Unfortunately, many of them probably won't get to take advantage of that. They may already be graduating and they're ready to get out and earn a living. And then in spring sports, this isn't Division I. We're not talking full scholarship type players. So there's actually a cost to coming back for another year. Even if you're working on your master's, there's some expense to that. So it was nice that the NCAA acted so quickly in granting that extra year of eligibility, the track and baseball and softball. And I'm sure off the top of my head, I'm forgetting some other sports, but I just don't know how many are actually going to take advantage of it. And I will say this, at West Liberty, we did make a commitment that we were going to try to honor any of those agreements for the kids coming back, where I've seen some schools across the country have moved on. They just said it's unfortunate, and they're not granting or they're not going to apply for the extra year. So it's a different situation for all parties across the country.
Do you know of some student athletes at West Liberty who are going to take advantage of it? Not asking names, obviously, but have you heard of people that want to do it?
Yes, we've had a few. It was a weird year anyway. We don't have a lot of graduating seniors this year. For some reason, and it just worked out that way, that the rosters were laden with underclassmen. But we have had a few that I think intend to come back, but it's not a high percentage.
Take us back to when you guys were preparing for the regional basketball tournament. Was it a really crazy time for you? Because I'm sure you had people coming at you from all corners wanting answers that at that point you didn't have to give them.
Right, and I still get that. I'm on the phone way more now than I've ever been in this profession, either as an athletic director or as a head coach. And it is now the buzzword in the industry is everything's fluid. It's a fluid situation. So the circumstances change literally every single day. And what I try to do is just be upfront and honest that I'll give them my opinion. I think this could happen, but by no means would I ever guarantee anything if I don't have that guarantee in writing. So again, it was a weird week just because we knew things had started to happen nationally, but it happened so quickly in those last 2 days. That was the surprising part, that it just went from one step to the next step. But everyone was focused in. It's just amazing how when you end the season with a championship, like our men did, even Coach Hallett said that's as focused as he's seen them. And he'll probably kill me for revealing this, but before the conference tournament started, I went to his office the day before they played and said, okay, Coach, what's your thoughts? And Ben, who, like most of us coaches, is our glass half empty. We don't set ourselves up for disappointment. He was remarkably positive going into that. He just said, I don't know what it is, but I feel we're ready to win this thing. So that gave me a little bit of confidence. And sure enough, a week later, they just had an outstanding performance and easily won that championship game.
Wait a second. Are we talking about the same Ben Hallett?
Yeah, the same Ben Hallett. Yeah, it's as positive, and just he knew. I don't know if he was reading the attitude and the body language of the players, but I've never seen him so fired up and ready to go than he was for that conference tournament.
Yeah, it was fun to see. Watching practice the week before the tournament started, you could see some of the guys the fire was burning hotter than it had all season long. I think they were ready to get at it, and the history, tells the rest of the story. They went on and won the conference tournament. How has it been for you personally in the athletics department, having to work from home and the difficulties in that?
There's some difficulties, and as I said last week, where it affects me the most is being able to be around my staff on a daily basis. And we talk about 1,000 different things, but it eventually all comes back around to brainstorming how we can be more efficient or have more success or whatever it may be. But a lot of that just comes out of general conversation. So we may sit down and start by talking about a television show the night before or another sport, or did you watch the Super Bowl or whatever it may be. But it's amazing how it'll always get back to work and it open up lines of communication. So that's where I'm disappointed. I think some of the coaches, this is not that much different for them, because as they get into the summer period, when the student athletes are around, they're working from a computer all the time anyway. Recruiting has changed, and you mentioned how was the head coach for a million years probably, and recruiting was different then. We didn't do so much by computer, and you were on the road more and going out and seeing shootouts and things like that. And now it's become way more tech savvy. Even my last couple of years in coaching, I can remember the old days where you got on the phone and it might have taken you 3 phone calls, and finally someone may attempt to send you a VHS tape in the mail. And then you'd wait like a week and you'd get it and you'd throw it in the old VCR. And at the end of my tenure, it had become so simple that all of the recruits had YouTube clips. So they would just send you a link, and it could be a kid from 300 miles away that you had never heard of. And within 1 minute, you're watching video. So it really has changed over the course of the year. So for our coaches, if they're not on campus with their athletes, it probably hasn't changed that much.
And Coach, talking about that recruiting in the last few years, handful of years that you coached, you brought in some of the greatest players that West Liberty women's basketball has ever seen, between Kylie Howe, Liz Flowers, Kiki Simpson, and then in your final year, Marissa Brown, who arguably may be the best player of all time, at least the most dominant player of all time, as a lady topper. So many great players. What were some of your favorite moments as coach at West Liberty?
Well, when I've coached that long, I'm obviously going to have tons of memories. And it's amazing. You're still young, Todd, and Shawn, you're young as well. But I would like to think the older we get, we have a tendency to forget about the negatives, whether you lost that game or whatever, and you really start appreciating what we were able to do and enjoy the positive things in your life. So most of my memories are 100% positive. I can remember getting hired as a young head coach with no college experience, and I was just too dumb and inexperienced and naive to even know what I got myself into. So I really was just figuring it out day by day. We had some successes in year 3, and then year 4 and 5 we lost in championship games. So probably the one thing that I still look back on was that first championship, something that I was completely driven toward. I had pretty much put my whole life into the basketball program and wanted to win that conference championship. We did that, I believe, in the 96-97 season, and I don't think West Liberty had won a tournament championship in basketball, men or women, since 1970 or 71. So we had gone a long time without capturing a tournament championship. So to have those disappointments, the Joanna Burnaby, Christy Peabody, Angela Fowler, Erica Bevington, et cetera, crew, to lose in back-to-back championships to an incredibly talented Salem team, but then to fight our way back in year 3 And for Joanna to hit a game-winning three was pretty darn special. I can just remember what an emotional moment that was. And then it just seemed like success breeds success. And we were able to bring more players in. And we just had a glorious run there from 97 on. I don't know how many straight championship games we played in. I think we played Glenville 5 consecutive years. So it was just an incredible experience. And for the most part, we were able to stay there. We weren't fortunate enough to win one for a while, but we were still making championship games. And you just get older, and then you start to doubt, are we ever going to do it again? And then fortunately, those last few years I coached, we did kind of have that dream class where you get 3 All-Americans in one class. And of course, we had some outstanding role players on those teams too, the Emily Bucons and Bree Kamericks and Jasmines of the world. So we really had some talent there. And fortunately, at the end of my career, I was able to have some of that success that we had earlier.
Lynn, when we look at where the men's game is on the Mountain East Conference level now, and how far that level of basketball has come up, oftentimes a lot of people attribute that to what Coach Crutchfield was able to do with West Liberty, and it kind of forced everybody else to up their games to get to the point where they were not going to get embarrassed every night by West Liberty. I would argue that you did the same thing with your West Liberty women's teams on that side of the equation. You guys made everybody else step up their programs.
Well, and I appreciate that. That's awful kind words. And again, I was blessed with some incredibly good players, great people. I had support in our upper administration from the AD up to the president through most of those years. And I do think there's a little truth in that. It's not my doing, I think our program's doing, but it was also a time when schools were poised to make that investment. Title IX had really come into play, and I think other schools looked at us and realized there's benefits to having successful women's sports. So when they saw the run we were having and the fan base that we had and the notoriety that we're starting to get, I do think that enabled those coaches to sit down and meet with their administration and say, hey, we need to attempt to do this. And it happened rather quickly there in the 2000s. And again, I'm old and I start to forget some details, but I believe there was one year right around that 2006, 7, 8, somewhere around there, we won 24 games and finished 4th in our conference. So it was just kind of where the men's league was 2 or 3 years ago with Wheeling and Fairmont and West Liberty, etc. That happened in basketball on the women's side. And we were putting 4 teams in almost every year. So I think we were kind of the lightning rod. And unfortunately, they did catch up to us a little bit.
We now Glenville, of course, with Coach Kim Stevens is kind of carrying that torch and has kind of set itself up above each the rest of the teams. What do other teams in the Mountain East have to do to catch up?
That's a question that if we all had answers, that we would be smarter than we actually are. And where Glenville has benefited from, and I think it's what our men did, they're playing a system that other people aren't. So they practice it every day. It's second nature to them. They've had success over a long period of time. It's been about a good 5-year run for them. And I think teams are going to have to at least look at what they're doing, and they got to prepare to beat Glenville. And again, that's easier said than done, and that's a credit to Kim and her staff and their players. but teams did close the gap on our men. That system was so dominant that we were literally winning by 30 points every night and forcing 25 turnovers every night. And teams started to prepare instead of saying, what do we have to do to win 20 games? I think teams started to say, what do we have to do to beat West Liberty's men? And I think that same mentality may have to start happening on the women's side, knowing we're all going to get our hearts broken every year until people figure this out. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's probably a start.
Yeah, Glenville State has been so dominant lately. It's going to be interesting to see what happens next year for the Lady Toppers. They lost a group of seniors that were pretty near and dear to this team. The two big ones with Morgan Bruner, Taylor Johnson, and Grace Fodor, and also Monica Bragg. Players that two of them, you were there when they came in, Monica and Grace. But to lose players like Morgan Bruner, Taylor Johnson, players that can really put points up and affect the game in other ways than just scoring as well.
Yeah, and that's the mark of quality programs, that you're always going to face losing great players. That's the reality. And it's just, I think they just need a little luck. They need to have some continued success. And recruiting is not an exact science. And sometimes you get a little luck. I can remember even with Kiki, she was a late signing in our recruiting class. She was not a five-star kid coming out of high school. We brought her up, worked her out, and I fell in love with her that day because she demonstrated an athleticism and effort level that you just don't see. So that could happen with any of our programs, including women's basketball. And I think Coach Cooper will announce a significant signing here. I don't want to spoil it for him, but I think they did land a high-impact kid here that we'll be releasing in the short term. But he's got some kids coming back that are ready to step up and maybe take a greater share of the offense. And I know he's happy. He's ecstatic with his recruiting class. And it's just getting them in and hoping that they're ready to play early.
It is going to be fun to see if they can get things going quickly for the Lady Toppers. Like you said, every year, every team loses seniors, and it's just got to find a way to get back into that one. We know, at least Shawn and I, we've known you for a little while. There are things outside of sports that you thoroughly enjoy. We know you really like a good story, whether it's reading a book, watching a TV show, or a movie. With the quarantine going on, all we see everywhere is people watching this show, binge watching that show. What are you doing to keep yourself entertained right now?
I'll have to admit the guilty pleasure in my life is late night TV watching. I've pretty much converted my wife to that. She is shocked at how addicted she's gotten to it. Netflix has been a godsend to most of us. Of course, I'm a TV junkie, so I also subscribe to every premium TV channel. Probably half of my salary goes to that medium, but I've just been watching a lot of TV, a lot of good series. In this last week, I just started Hunters, which is a fictional story loosely based on Nazi hunting after the war, and Al Pacino stars in that, and it's a good show. And of course, you know I'm a Game of Thrones fan, and Don Clegg and I talked about rereading the books until they come out with the next one. So again, it's a guilty pleasure, but I do love my TV, and there's enough problems in the world that I've always felt that TV is a great place to escape. It's a way to get away from it all and just sit back and live in a fictional world in a lot of accounts and enjoy some time.
I agree. Right now it's about 1:30 in the afternoon, and after we get off here, that's about going to be the rest of my day and night. It's just laying in front of the TV. People, it drives me crazy that people are like, "Oh, I can't take this. I can't stay in this long." I'm like, this is what I always wanted. Like, just leave me at home and I'll be fine.
And you know, I've also, and Todd mentioned this, I am an avid reader. I have read thousands of books in my life, but the problem with that is finding a good book. And that's easier said than done. At least with TV, you can click on and watch for 5 minutes, and if you don't like it, go find something else. It's not as quite as easy. So until R.R. Martin comes out with that next Game of Thrones book, I'm going to be on edge here.
Well, there is one show on Netflix that Shawn and I have talked about quite a bit on this podcast. He even tried to get an interview with one of the participants of that show. Hasn't come through yet. I don't think she'll talk to us. But it's Tiger King. Have you watched that on Netflix?
I have. Very, very skeptical going in. And then I had a couple people, Brad Forsey told me, give it a shot. You need to give it a shot. And my wife and I sat down, and it wasn't what I expected. I was thinking more of like a reality TV show that was scripted, whatever. And I guess I just really didn't realize that it's kind of a true crime type scenario, and you get a little invested in the characters. So I'm going to admit I really enjoyed it. And who is Shawn trying to interview?
Carol Baskin. We're trying to get Carol on the show.
Yeah, she, I've heard she's not real happy with how she was portrayed. So maybe this is a chance for her to tell her side. So
that's what I thought. And she's originally from West Virginia, down around the Charleston area. I thought it would be perfect.
Yeah, that might be a forum for her to kind of turn the tide of public opinion.
Of course, to do that, she might want a little bit more money than we have, meaning if she wants more than zero, we're not having this interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'll turn this around and ask you two, any chance you followed Homeland?
No, I have not.
I have not.
Yeah, that's been on since 2011, and this Sunday is the series finale. Claire Danes is the star, and CIA-based, a lot of intrigue, and I was a big Ray Donovan fan as well, and that's come to an end. So unfortunately for me, a lot of these long-running series have all had their series finales, and I've got to find new.
I know that's the worst for me, when you watch a long show and you're so invested, and then it comes to an end, and it's like, now what do I do? And then you have the feeling, oh well, I'm not gonna find something else that I'm that into, and inevitably it takes me a couple of weeks, and then I do. I'm watching a series on Netflix right now called Money Heist, which is just, it's mind blowing. It's really fun.
I heard that was good. So thanks for the suggestion. That may be kind of next on my list. But there's just so many entertaining things to be found. But unfortunately for me, my whole life has been built around athletics. But I'm a sports nerd. So when they're doing all these reruns, I know the games. I know what's going to happen. I know everything about it. So I probably watch less of the athletic reruns and things. I am going to binge The Last Dance, so I did not watch the first two episodes, and I'm going to tape it and watch all that because I am a big Michael Jordan fan.
Well,
even Dookie is a Michael Jordan fan.
Big Michael Jordan fan.
See, that's one thing I would like to see. I mean, I'm a nobody, but I would like to see less Duke men's basketball fans in the athletic department at West Liberty. I think that would be great.
Well, we always laugh that we need to have a better job application. You know, unfortunately, HR won't let us do that, and they have to reveal who their rooting interests are for.
Well, at least Rex is a Miami fan. He's a Hurricane fan, so he's an ACC opponent. He's directly against them. At least got that.
Well, but, you know, we've given Rex a lot of grief about being a Miami fan. I've got multiple losers in my department, but, you know, it's fun to debate. And here's another thing. I don't know how much time we have here, but this was an interesting thing. I even tried to get Dr. Griner involved a couple weeks ago when they did the poll the best college basketball player of all time. And it was interesting, the debate for a couple days. But soon as Shaq defeated Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I just said that blew that out of the water, and there's no sense even following it anymore.
Yeah. Kareem was the best.
Right,
Absolutely.
and there's people that could make a legitimate case that Kareem's the best player ever.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you look at his resume, you could make an argument that he's right there with Jordan. So for him to get knocked out in the first round with that ridiculous bracket, that pretty much soured me on it. But Kyle Cooper put J.J. Redick on his all-time team. So,
Ooh. Are we talking like an all-time starting five?
well, I don't know if he had him, but I do think he had him in his top 10. I think Kyle did submit to me. I had reached out and said, everybody give me your top 5 players. And we kind of did a poll, and he made a couple teams, but he had J.J. Redick in there. So.
See, I'm a Carolina fan, so that was in the same time I was growing up. And if there was one Duke guy that I just absolutely could not even stand to look at, it was J.J. Redick.
And I think I was probably on that side too, but I have respected what he's done as a professional.
Mm-hmm.
I think he came in with a lot of hype, and there were some skeptics, but he's carved himself out a nice career. But when we were doing that list, it was pretty much Lou Alcindor, Abdul-Jabbar, Pete Maravich made a lot of people's list. Oscar Robertson was on that list.
Christian Laettner, just the fact that he made it to the Final Four that many times.
Yeah, Christian Laettner was in the conversation, but when you're picking the top 5, I don't think he quite made that list. But there's just been some – Bill Walton has always been one of my top 2. I was in junior high and got to witness that, and he was just a college player right up there with Abdul-Jabbar.
I don't think this guy I'm going to mention is in that category, but somebody that was really good whenever I was growing up in college basketball that for some reason I think gets overlooked is Danny Manning at Kansas. He was a tremendous basketball player back in the day.
Yes, he was. And he kind of caught everybody by surprise. They made that magical run.
Mm-hmm.
And, he did win a national championship. So, yes, he's definitely on that list. But and that's one of the differences. That's what I love about Division II basketball. And what I loved about following college basketball back in the 70s and the 80s is we didn't have the one and done or the 2 years and done. I can remember in the Big East when Patrick Ewing and those guys were playing, every fan could name 5 or 6 starting fives. Like, who's the starting 5 at Wake Forest? Who's the starting 5 at St. John's or Boston College? And there was just so much more buy-in, and that's what I love about Division II, that you can kind of follow these kids and these teams and make them your own. So there were just a lot of great players, and that's why when we're mentioning the modern day guys, why I think it's so difficult to put them on that list. Many of them only played 1 year.
Right.
And their freshman year, their 1 year is not going to equal what other guys did over 3 years of that. So I even had the argument, some people had Carmelo Anthony as the greatest college player of all time. And yes, he had a great year, but he wasn't even his conference player of the year. Right. So how are you going to put him on a list of the top 5 or 10 players of all time?
Yeah, that's tough.
I can see these debates happening all the time in the athletics department. I mean, I feel like I kind of want to just stop over more often so I can get in on these debates because I think I'd learn something, a thing or two about some of these players that I haven't seen because I'm a little bit too young to have really gotten the full effect of how good they were.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about YouTube. And I can remember I was debating one of my assistants, and this was 7-8 years ago. I can't remember who it was, and they remember a hobbled Bill Walton in 1986 playing for the Celtics.
Right.
and they didn't know the athleticism. So I said, here, do me a favor, go to YouTube, and there's a YouTube clip that'll show all 21 of his baskets in that NCAA championship game. And I'll ask you two to do it when this show's over. Go watch it. It'll be 2 minutes in length. And look at how many various ways he scored. And you're going to go, wow, that's pretty darn impressive for the mid-70s. So there's your homework for today.
It's not college, but let me ask you this. All this stuff is going on in part because of The Last Dance. That era it has come back up into the social media stratosphere. I want to ask you this, Lynn, in his prime, could Larry Bird play in today's NBA?
You broke up there. Which player?
Larry Bird.
Larry Bird would be a player of the year type player. I remember back in his days, hand checking was beyond belief. And now the most valuable players are the stretch guys, the bigger guys that can step out. Today's game is perfect for Larry Bird. And people are going to go, well, was he quick enough to guard whatever? Well, Steph Curry does fine. He's probably my favorite player right now because Steph Curry is a good team defender. Larry Bird actually even made an All-NBA defensive team once. He was a great team defender. So would Larry Bird guard the other team's best player? Is he going to have to check Kevin Durant the whole game? No. But on the offensive end, he would literally be unstoppable.
He's one of those guys that I just think, for some reason, doesn't get enough credit. I mean, that guy was unbelievable. He had all the tools.
Yep, I agree. And I could talk this stuff all day long.
Unfortunately, we've got about 90 seconds before Zoom cuts us off here. I got a countdown going on top of the screen here. One final thing from me. It is not sports related. It'll be Game of Thrones related since that's one of the things besides our last name that we have in common. I love Game of Thrones. Now that the season over, we're approaching the 1-year anniversary of the final season. After seeing all of it, name just your one favorite character of Game of Thrones.
That's easy for me, Arya, for sure. I've read every book. She quickly became my favorite at the very beginning, including the series, my favorite. So for sure, my favorite character. And not that we love violence, but the satisfaction when she started getting some revenge for her father. Pretty darn cool.
Yeah, by far one of my favorite characters as well. Coach, I can't thank you enough for taking the time being with us today. Shawn, thank you as well for being on this interview. Topper Nation, I hope you enjoyed this. And, Coach, we'll have to have you back on again sometime soon.
If you get bored, I love talking sports.
Let's do it. Thank you very much, Coach.
You.
A special thank you to Coach Ullom for that. That was a lot of fun getting to talk to him. That was by far the biggest name so far, West Liberty Athletics. He's the top dog, the athletic director, and a legend in coaching on the Hilltop. So it was fun to hear him talk about some of the years past and how, he deferred credit a little bit there, at least coaching-wise, when we talked about some of his dominant teams. And he said it was, the talent. It was the players, that he brought in that were willing to come to West Liberty. And he wants to defer credit for how well the teams did because of that talent, but he also has to recruit that talent in. And we kind of talked about this off air. You bring some talent in, more wants to go there if that talent has success.
Absolutely. And the thing is, winning does a lot of selling for your program on its own. And they were ahead of their time, like we mentioned previous to talking to him. The style that they were playing, nobody was doing that. Nobody else was. So if you wanted to play in a run and gun, up-tempo, in-your-face style, where else were you going to go? I mean, it was West Liberty. They set the standard, but at the same time, the talent that he was able to amass. And I hate to keep making this comparison, but it's it's an apt one. Again, they were the West Liberty men before the West Liberty men were.
Yeah.
I mean, they were the show. And Kyle's still playing that same exact fun, in-your-face style. And that's why when you go to a West Liberty women's game at the ASRC, there are more people in that building than anywhere else you go in the MEC to watch a women's basketball game, because it's exciting. I don't want to be an old curmudgeon, but they play basketball, and they have for a long time, the way basketball was meant to be played.
And that's why every single year they have at least one national statistic leader, and usually it's three-point shooting, whether it's three-pointers made or percentage, something along with shooting-wise, because the toppers for Don Clegg has it in our game notes every game. And what is it, since 94 or 97? I forget what crazy stat it is. The Lady Toppers have hit a three-point shot in every single game for –
I think it's over 750 games, something like that.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And, in my time in calling games, it was McKenna Shives hitting all the three-point shots and setting records and winning awards. Then Morgan Bruner comes in as a transfer 2 years in a row. It's Morgan winning awards, and it's a lot of fun. Then you have Audrey Tingle, who's still on the team, and she is kind of at times a Luke Dyer-ish type of player where she's going to have an awful lot of assists, not too many turnovers, but she's going to hit the three as well. She's got that capability now. She developed that in the past couple of years, and she's gotten really good at it. So the style of play, like you said, again, we are very spoiled and very lucky to get to call games at West Liberty University, everything involved, because I really wouldn't want to be anywhere else. It's a lot of fun because of the way they play the game. And to me, too, also because of the people who are involved. They're good people. So when you're involved with good people, you want to see good things happen. And I think across that program, top to bottom, that's what you have, are good people. And so when they have success, you feel their excitement. At the same time, when they're struggling, you kind of feel their frustration. And I know you and I did right along with Kyle Cooper and Cassie Seth this year. It was a frustrating year. I don't know if Kyle would use that term. It was frustrating in that they just couldn't get over the hump. They were so close. They were doing the right things. And it was literally a play or two here a game that was the difference. But he's going to get it turned around. There's no doubt about it. He's just too good of a tactician and too good of a person not to do that. And I agreed with what Coach Ullom said in the interview. They just need a little bit of luck. A bounce here, a bounce there. Again, people want to look at their record and be like, oh, yeah, this past year wasn't the best, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, you know what? They beat Notre Dame, again, one of the top teams in the conference. They were in the MEC championship title game for the tournament this past year. Beat them on their own home floor. And then when Glenville State comes to West Liberty, we put up triple digits just like they did. And we're very close to beating another top team in the conference. So you don't see that with some of the other teams that, record-wise, you look that are right around where West Liberty was this past season. You don't see those teams doing that. And
no.
Even Urbana, with the player of the year, the Toppers, played well against the top teams in the conference, just didn't have a whole lot of luck on their side.
And the one thing is, and I know that they're going to address this in recruiting, they need to get a little more athletic. And what I mean by that specifically is there were too many times this year where the defense would make 2 or 3 stops in a row, and they wouldn't be able to make the other team pay. They need the type of athleticism. They need the type of person in a close game where you say, okay, out of a timeout, we're giving her the ball, and she's going to go get a bucket one way or another. And they really haven't had that the last year, I should say, because they did the year before that in Marissa Brown. But if they can get a player or two like that, I think you will see things change dramatically and rather quickly.
And the last portion of the year, we've said it a few times here on the podcast already, but at the end of the year last year, at least the regular season, it was Liv Belknap was that player for the Lady Toppers. But some of that athleticism coming back. The Toppers graduate a good bit of it between Taylor Johnson, Morgan Bruner, Grace Fodor, even Monica Bragg coming off the bench. And poor Monica banged up and injured a lot of her career at West Liberty, but she toughed it out, and she had to go up against some very difficult competition throughout her time at West Liberty, playing in the post and a lot of good posts, but she had to go against the best every single day in practice in Marissa Brown. So I'm sure when it came to game time, she's like, oh, this may be difficult, but it's nothing compared to what I face every single day.
Every program, men's, women's, whatever sport you're talking about, needs a Monica Bragg. Just one of those people that doesn't care who gets the credit. And there were games where she might have played 1 minute. The next night she plays 20, and you never saw her demeanor change. And with her, it was a situation where you mentioned it. I mean, she was giving up a lot of weight and a good deal of strength to a lot of these post players, and it didn't matter. Whatever she was asked to do, she tried to the best of her ability, no matter what it was. And you need those people, at least one in every program, because that kind of thing rubs off on other people. Fifth-year senior, or not a fifth year, but a senior who, again, doesn't play a lot, but gives everything when she gets in there. And the younger players see that, and they understand right away that that's what it takes.
Even in practice, she's a consummate practice player. I mean, if it's a quiet practice, not a whole lot of rah-rah, anything like that, she is the one that you hear. And she's not the only one, but always a positive person during practices and all of those good things. So that's going to be tough to lose, but you see a lot of it in the works with the younger players as well for the Lady Toppers. They're going to be just fine. And it's going to be fun to see this year. I don't know if there's going to be more speed on the team this year. I think having Destiny Hutchison, hopefully she'll feel comfortable without the knee brace. She told me she could have played without it this year, but just the mental, keep yourself safe. I get it 100%. But we'll see how the Lady Toppers get off and running in the 2021 season. Well, it was also fun hearing Coach Ullom getting to talk about some of the things that are entertaining for him. TV shows, books, movies. Again, anything that's a good story, and I'm right along there with him. If you really get Coach Ullom, myself, you're not a big Game of Thrones fan, right?
No, I haven't seen a lot of it.
But Don Clegg, get him on. We could do a podcast. I swear to you, we could do a 3 to 4 hour talk for every single season, maybe more for all of the seasons. We love this show, and we used to talk about it quite a bit. I knew the answer when I asked Coach Ullom who his favorite character was. I knew it was Arya. I think at this point, how everything went down, I'm not going to spoil it if you hadn't seen it or if you want to at some point. I wouldn't feel bad if I spoiled it for anybody anyways. It's been almost a year since it aired, so I don't really care. But I won't spoil it. I won't be too much of a jerk. She was the obvious favorite character of everybody's. But it's that type of show where it's the up and down. You see certain characters right away you hate. Then they humanize them. Okay, I can understand why they made these decisions to make me hate them. They make some good decisions. I really like them now. Then they kind of revert back to the bad guy. Like, oh, why would he do this? I get why he would do it. I understand why he would do it, but I just don't like that he would. But it's a very good show back and forth. If you gave it a chance and didn't like it, I get it. But it's really fun to get the fun side, I guess you could say, or what the athletes and coaches and realize that their life is a lot about sports, but not everything is about sports.
It's funny you mentioned that because that was going to be my next thing I said. I really enjoy doing these types of things because it shows a human side to people that we don't, for whatever reason in society, think of that way. You think about Lynn Ullom, he's been at West Liberty for what seems like since the foundation was laid there. No, that's not an old joke. That's not where I was going with that. Just he seems like he's been there forever. But you remember him as a coach. You remember him now. This generation will remember him as an AD. But that's what he does. That's not who he is. And to kind of give people that inside scoop. I know scoop's not the right thing, but an inside look at to what makes these individuals actually tick, I think is one of the coolest things that we're able to do.
Yeah, that's the part I enjoy, the most fun I have with the interviews, because some of these questions that we ask, I think we already know the answer to, but the folks at home don't. So that's why we ask the questions. For us, it may be something we've heard a million times, and even the person we're interviewing knows we know the answer, but aware that the folks at home want to know this stuff too, and that's the whole point we're doing this. We're trying to keep people entertained during a really, really tough time, and hopefully I was thoroughly entertained with the interview. I enjoyed myself. We talked a little bit after it was done, and I'd love to have Coach back on because there were several topics I had written down that we didn't get a chance to get to because we had enough material to talk about before that. So we'll have to get him back on. Maybe get a little bit more about the person that Lynn Ullom is, not so much the coach or athletic director. That would be a lot of fun. Some of it to do with sports, see what it was like, what he played growing up, what stuff he thoroughly enjoyed doing. Was it always basketball that he loved? Were there any other sports? Things like that. We'll find out. But yeah, this has been a fun one, Shawn. Coach Ullom did such a good job. We got to get him back 2 weeks in a row, or 2 shows in a row for you. Are we going to make it 3? I got to figure out. I think the next episode is going to be assistant coach Cassie Seth. We've done men's basketball heavy on these podcasts early on, so we're trying to mix it up a little bit. We've been women's basketball heavy now. We just had Malik McKinney. We're going to have Coach Ullom on this one, and then the next one we'll release is Cassie Seth. So we're going back to the women's basketball side of things. So it'll be interesting to see how this podcast continues on. We're going to have to, again, the MEC Hoops guy, we talked about this last podcast, try to get him on the Twitter.
I talked to him.
Is he good?
He's in.
All right. We'll have to get him on. That'll be a lot of fun. If you're not on Twitter, it's okay. MEC Hoops super fan. He's at all the MEC tournaments. We see him quite a bit traveling around to the games we go to broadcast for West Liberty. We'll see him around random places. It's a lot of fun. He's a good guy.
He did the men's tournament for on Twitter to see who would be voted the MEC all-time best player on the men's side. That, of course, was won by Cedar Bonifant from West Liberty. And he right now is getting ready to do the women's side.
I don't know why I feel like that one is going to be way more difficult than the men's side.
It's going to be.
Yeah. And again, I'm biased, and I could already give you my top 4, and they're all played in black and gold. And I couldn't even give you in there the order. There would be no order. Like, just here are the top 4 of mine. You put in whatever order you want. That's fine with me. Marissa, and then the big 3: Liz Flowers, Kiki, and Kylie Howe. I mean, how could you go against it?
And we didn't even mention Hillary Southworth, who, before she blew up her knee, was just incredible.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, Coach Ullom sure knew how to get the talent to West Liberty. It started early in his career, and even finished his career with it in recruiting what, again, arguably the best player ever at West Liberty University in Marissa Brown. In my mind, and I've watched a lot of girls and women's basketball in my lifetime. My sister played when I was growing up, so it's been pretty much my entire life watching women's basketball. Marissa might be the most dominant player I've ever seen play.
At least locally, there's not a close second.
Yeah.
Because you just throw the ball into her, and what are you going to do? And defensively too. And I think that's where, more than the offensive part, I think that's where this season's team missed Marissa, was having that rim protector back there. She's the best that I've seen come through West Liberty.
Yeah.
Now, I wasn't there for some of the really, really good players from back in the day. I remember, kind of watching them from afar, but I wasn't involved like I am now. There were some really good players back then, but as far as, just from the MEC era, it's Marissa. Then I would have to go Howe, Simpson, and Flowers. And if you're saying Liz Flowers is the fourth best,
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, I'd love to play on that team or call games for that team. Just have that four, just let them play. Another one from before my time at West Liberty and before the formation of the Mountain East Conference, back when it was the West Virginia Conference, Joanna Burnaby. She's now the head coach at Boston College women's basketball team. So you saw what she did as a player in her career at West Liberty and what she was able to do as a professional coach. She moved up those ranks and is doing an extremely good job, and it made everyone at West Liberty proud. Everyone.
Absolutely. It's always fun to see folks go on to bigger and better things and to really make a name for themselves. And Joanna, incredibly humble, and she is a person who 100% has not forgotten where she's come from. She still mentions the area all the time. West Liberty, they went and saw and watched them practice last year and watched the game. She's still very much connected, even though she's farther away.
That's the one. That's the last thing. We got about a couple minutes left here, but that's the fun thing about the women's program as well. Coach Kyle Cooper makes sure or tries as much as possible that the alumni, the former Lady Toppers that have played for that team are involved and they keep with it. And it's a big deal for Coach Cooper and that team to make sure the history stays what it is. And he's going to be a big part of continuing to keep that history and to making new history at West Liberty. Shawn, thank you again for being on today. We'll get you on again sometime soon. A huge thank you to Coach Ullom for coming on and giving us his time. Next time he comes back, we're just going to talk TV shows, books, stories. We're not going to talk about anything sports. We'll find out. Hopefully he's good for that. And we might be able to talk for a few hours, so people get pretty annoyed on this. Again, thank you for watching Topper Nation. I am Todd Ullom. Shawn Rine, thank you again. And we will see you next time on the Hilltopper Sports Podcast.